Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Perfect Pup podcast. My name is Devin, and I am very excited about today's episode. We have Allie Tellier on, and she is with CCBS, known as Center for Canine Behavior Studies. And we're going to be talking today about our relationships with our dogs, the shelter problem in America, and just generally how we can improve our relationship with our dogs and become better pup parents. So thank you so much, Allie, for coming on. I'm really excited for today.
Oh, we're equally as excited. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I'll give a little interview of you, and I'm sure I'll miss a few points and you can fill them in. But Allie spent 15 years at the Worcester, I looked up the pronunciation, Worcester, and Allie had to tell me correctly, Worcester Animal Rescue League, or also known as WARL, in Massachusetts, where she spent a lot of 15 years helping to advocate for better policies for dogs, policies for shelters, increasing adoptions and return to owner rates, and just bringing awareness to, things like breed-specific legislation and providing resources for pet parents to help them become better pet parents and keep their dogs in their home. And now she is the executive director at the Center for Canine Behavior Studies. I miss anything? Did I get most of it there?
You did, and that was tricky because both of the organizations I've been affiliated with have super long names. So thank you for getting that right. Good job.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we're going to dive right into it. I know I have a lot of questions. I'm excited for the listeners. So just a little bit on your backstory, like how did you originally get involved in the shelter dog world? Like what was your why for wanting to advocate for dogs? Where did that start?
So I was always an animal lover. My parents raised me, in a very compassionate way towards animals. And being an only child with a German Shepherd at home when I was growing up, I really took to him almost like it was a brother in some, crazy little kid way. But I was always trying to play veterinarian with my stuffed animals. And it was just a part of who I was being this animal advocate or animal lover. And I went to college for marine biology to start because I have admiration for marine life. And, as most of our college careers do, it took a couple twists and turns. And I ended up in a business school. And while I was there, I applied to work at the Worcester Animal Rescue League, just cleaning kennels and taking care of the cats and dogs. And my role there evolved in 15 years. And it was a great experience. And I was able to really test the waters in every single position at the shelter and then really learn a lot more about what is animal sheltering, not just in Massachusetts, but New England and the country and even the world. And it really just, once you're in it, it pulls you in and you really can never, it's part of who you are. Mm-hmm. And I think during my journey there, I didn't go there to lead the shelter and to, become an executive director. But during that journey, a dog came in who was a juvenile delinquent. And I say that with all of the love in the world. He was a 6-month-old punk who was, not harassing people, but he was just a little punkster. And he would mouth people. He would put his mouth on your arm in a playful way because no one ever taught him what the appropriate thing to do is. Mm-hmm. And he was going to be euthanized for that behavior because he was too rambunctious and he was a pit bull mix. Mm-hmm. And I convinced the manager at that point to let me take him home, and I adopted him. And he then became really my why, my reason for, because I saw the potential that he had. And I just thought it was irresponsible to disregard his life because of one or two bad interactions or the fact that he didn't know any better. Mm-hmm. And he was going to be euthanized. And I see so many other shelter dogs that came down with the same behaviors, and that's not an acceptable future for them. To me, I don't believe that animals like that should be euthanized. It's really just, they need a better outlet. They need to be understood. And that's why I'm so excited right now to be with CCBS, because as we'll get to, it's really about the prevention and supporting the relationship that people have with their dogs so that it doesn't lead to lack of education or lack of training, and then down the road relinquishing to shelters.
I love that point. And I think, what you said of they just don't know any better. I mean, I think in us as humans, we have these expectations for dogs that we see on TV or whatever, or we see our neighbors with a seemingly perfect dog. And we just think, okay, that's how they should be. Why aren't they doing what I want? Why do they do this? Why don't they do that? And the fact of the matter is most of the behaviors we're asking our dogs to do are completely the opposite of what is natural for them. And so I love that point that it's just, we need to have compassion and understanding for the dog's behaviors. One kind of point off of that, and after this, we'll kind of move more into the CCBS, but what do you feel like? I think a lot of people who have dogs honestly have no idea like what the state of shelters are in America. I mean, you were involved in it super heavily for 15 years. Like, what is happening with shelter? I mean, is it a ton of dogs coming through? What were you seeing when you were working in shelters?
Sure. That's a great question. And it varies depending on really where you are in the country. And so much has changed in the last 15 to 20 years. I mean, 20 years ago in New England, animals were being euthanized just based on population because there was not enough homes for the animals that needed care. And there weren't enough resources like spay and neuter and some of these other resources that pet owners need to provide for them. And so the only answer at that point was euthanasia. And then came the availability of affordable spay and neuter services, the acceptance that spaying and neutering is what you should do, like with no questions asked, and more responsible pet ownership. And I think up here in the Northeast, in the New England area, New York, New Jersey too, you really see what progressive spay and neuter programs, the impact they can make. Because now, there used to be tens of thousands, maybe even more than that, animals brought to shelters that were either surrendered or just found as stray. That has changed so much, where now the shelters in the Northeast are bringing in dogs from Texas, from Puerto Rico, from Florida, because down there, they're still having the same issue. They're having this overpopulation issue because of the lack of resources, the availability of affordable resources. And there's also just cultural differences. Usually, not to generalize, but down south, there is a larger need for farming dogs, for hunting dogs. Certainly not as much up here in New England. And so you have these different pockets around the country where it's either due to, like I've said, lack of resources or just different cultural beliefs or dogs serving a different purpose that you see the different influxes in shelters. And I think it's beautiful that so many shelters have made these collaborations where they're importing dogs. And then you have different programs like Pilots for Paws and some of these others that will transport the animals up for free, because that in itself is very expensive and needs to be done correctly. So to get kind of back to your question, I think if you were to look in the shelters in the Northeast, there's not a lot of local animals because a good majority of the population are coming in from out of state, which is helpful because it helps those animals and those shelters that are so burdened. But the local dogs that we have are usually those juvenile delinquents that we talk about. Or, maybe an accidental litter here and there. But I have to say, in my 15 years at the Worcester Animal Rescue League, I may have seen, less than a dozen litters of puppies. Kittens is still an issue. We're talking, more on the dog side of things here, but, really there was not a lot of overpopulation for the dogs. But you do see these dogs that come in with behavioral issues. And I think that, that's what motivates me to continue with CCBS and to work through that, because those dogs deserve answers. Right. And there's enough people out there that can help support them. But I'm also glad that shelters are there. And I think that shelters really serve an important purpose for our society, because sometimes life happens. I know if I was ever in a position, I would, so many people say this too, I would live in my car with my dogs before ever surrendering them. But what if you didn't have that option? What if you, heaven forbid you get sick and, someone's in the hospital and they can't care for their pet and they don't have any family members that can care for their pet? there's a shelter there that can at least take care of your pet and find it a good home. And that's what I think a lot of people would want had they have no other options. So again, I think shelters are really important. It's certainly not our goal to put shelters out of business. It's just to help support owners so that shelters can be avoided, because those dogs with true behavior issues don't really thrive in a shelter. It's really difficult. Shelters are wonderful, and the people who work there are absolute angels. But it's a very unnatural environment, and it's really difficult for a dog who's already struggling with some behavior issues to then be there, and their stress level just increases, and it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love that kind of overview that at the end of the day, shelters are good and we do need them. But I think that's a perfect segue for, what you're doing now at CCBS, because even the point you made of, just education and preventative measures with spaying and neutering is what, has helped in the Northeast, in the New England area. So give us an overview of the Center for Canine Behavior Studies, and maybe in particular, your focus as well at the CCBS.
Sure. So the Center for Canine Behavior Studies is focused on finding canine behavior solutions that reduce relinquishment and euthanasia, and really help strengthen the relationship that people have with their pets so that they can keep them for their pet's life. So essentially, we do studies, we do research on dog behavior and relationships that people have with their animals to better understand where's the tipping point, what's acceptable, what can people realistically handle, and at what point do people start turning to shelters? Because we want, again, to support shelters, not necessarily take the animals away from them, because it's just unfortunately not the best scenario for them, and studies have shown that. So the team at CCBS is led by world-renowned veterinary behaviorist Dr. Dodman, and he is like a celebrity in the animal welfare world. He's been on Oprah. He's a best-selling author. He's been on Good Morning America, The Animal Planet. I'm sure you've seen him on. And he is such a guru for animal behavior. And the rest of our team as well. And it's a small, tight team, but of phenomenal, brilliant, enthusiastic, crazy pet lovers, right? And it's really just, I have to pinch myself that I'm associated with them, because they're just absolutely brilliant. And our focus and our research really is going to make an impact, and already has, on the relationship with your pet. Because for some, the relationship you have with your pet could be the best relationship that you ever have in your whole life. You'll always remember the pets, and especially those, I call them soulmates. Those, we love our pets, of course. And just like kids, you don't want to play favorites, but there are going to be some who really just forever have a piece of your heart, and those soulmates that you have. And I feel like for me, like I was sharing about my dog Champ, that was his name. He's my motivation. And I think just the transformation he made motivates me to try to help other dogs do this too.
Yeah, that makes sense. So a question. So when you say behavior studies, I mean, are you guys like studying the dog's brain to see how they respond to certain things? Or is it like studying how pet parents are training their dogs? Like, give me a little more insight on what those studies look like in particular.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, we've done quite a few different studies so far, and they touch on a few different ways. It isn't necessarily studying like the physiology of decision-making for the animals or in the brain, but it is more about the relationships. How are people training their dogs? At what age? What age are they being neutered at? And how does this all affect the outcome? Does it matter how old the animal is when training begins, or does just attending a training class have that much of an impact? So those are, and what some other studies we've done are what deciding factors go into choosing a dog. Is it just the, aesthetics of a dog, or do the people go into researching different breeds, or is it just window shopping and very impulsive? So it's all those types of things. And we try to put them together and make sense of them and pull out the important findings that can really help owners, veterinarians, trainers just do better.
I love it. That's super interesting. And for the listeners who are, likely pretty aware with what we're doing at Pupford, like the reason I got so excited about this interview is that I feel like the CCBS and Pupford and like generally what we're trying to accomplish is very related of, our main focus at Pupford is training because, like you're seeing with these studies, like it does matter that you train your dog. It does matter when, it does matter how, the positive reinforcements, science-based methods that are going to increase that bond with your dog. So on that note, with 15 years of experience in the shelter world, and now, you're at CCBS and you're going more into this research side of things, what do you feel like is one of the most important things that pup parents can do to improve their relationship with their dog? I know that's a very big question and there could probably be hundreds of answers, but like, what are a couple things that you think are most important for people who are sitting there thinking, I want to improve my relationship with my dog. My dog might be a little bit of a punk right now. I'm struggling with biting. I'm struggling with chewing. They're jumping on everyone. What are your pieces of advice for those people?
Yeah, sure. And I'm so glad that you touched on the correlation between Pupford and CCBS, because I thought of that too. We're all about empowering that relationship, and that's exactly what you guys are about too. Gosh, that's a really good one. I think it's putting the time in, but don't get overwhelmed by how much that's going to take, because as complex as dogs are, they don't need a ton. They need love. They need attention. They need respect. They need some guidance here and there. But just because your house may not be perfect, or your yard may not be perfect, or your lifestyle, they don't care if you're a Red Sox fan or a Yankees fan. They just appreciate being with you. And I think it's basic, where you have to just respect them, provide them with that positive reinforcement and just positivity around them. If you're struggling with behaviors, find a reputable trainer or a reputable program that only works in the positive reinforcement based methods, because studies time and time again have shown how ineffective negative or aversive, right? Thank you. Aversive methods are, and it's just, I think it's just so important. And then once they catch on to that, it's smooth sailing. Not to say that the dogs may not have, may not listen. There's so much like a toddler at times where they might know what the right thing to do is, but they're still going to try to run across the street without you holding their hand, because they're going to test the boundaries. But that's our job as pup parents, is to manage them and make sure that they're going to be safe. Maybe not like a helicopter parent, but just, making sure that you're there for them and that you're there for them for their life. And I think that that's another important part. However long or short it may be, it's never long enough, certainly. But being realistic, if you haven't gotten a pet yet, think about, again, you don't have to have 3 acres. You can have an apartment and have a dog. Mm-hmm. But just if you're going off to college in the next year, think about, this may not be the right time, and have that plan. And I think sort of being in the era we are now of COVID too, it's great to think ahead and it's a plan. If something were to happen to me or my family, who's going to take care of my dog? And you can have those sort of plans, I think it's the ASPCA says, for an emergency planning, pin that to your fridge. So if like a first responder ever came in, they would see, here's my emergency plan for my dog. Or you can have like a little wallet card. I kind of took that a little a different road for you.
No, I think that's great, because really what you're talking about is just like, whether, because we have to give our dogs time. That was kind of your first point. But again, just being prepared. And I think a lot of it is being prepared ourselves as the humans to say, like a lot, like if you are getting a puppy, recognize you might have to wake up multiple times in the night for a couple weeks or months. Like, it's going to take effort. And I think it's so true with anything that we do in life, whether you're, want to become a world-renowned, rock band, like, you've got to put the time in, you got to practice, you have to be there, you have to put in the effort. And I think part of that too with ourselves, and it just kind of got me thinking that we have to be able to adapt as well. And I think that's part of like the whole being prepared thing, is like being able to understand we're not going to know everything right off the bat, but we can get resources, we can find things. And on that note, for people who are wondering, and I'm sure there's people who are like, okay, what are these studies telling us? I'm going to put a link in the show notes that will link to the Center for Canine Behavior Studies, and people can go check out some of the different things that you guys have done. But, for you, like, I know we've kind of hit on this. I know we've kind of already talked about it, but being at the Center for Canine Behavior Studies and all your experience beforehand, like, what's your favorite part about advocating for dogs? Like, what do you, maybe it's like one of the particular studies you're doing right now that's really intriguing to you. Like, what's your favorite part about your job right now on a day-to-day basis?
I love advocating for the underdog, and I love being able to support someone so that they can have the relationship that I've had with the dogs that I've had in my life. The dogs I've had and the dogs that I've met through the shelter, and maybe I've only had them for a little time as they're transitioning from one place to the other, to be able to provide that comfort and that peace and that stability to them, and then realizing how much it actually benefits me, because they're that constant, right? They are your constant support system, and that unconditional love, I think, is something that everybody should have, because it just, you don't realize how much you really value it, and you need that. And I think dogs really play an important part of our life. So I love being able to help mend that relationship. When I was at the shelter, I loved being able to help find that relationship, finding your soulmate and a soul dog, if you will. And here at CCBS now, it's mending that relationship and making sure that it's maintained and it stays loving and healthy, because it just benefits the dog, obviously, but it benefits us too. So I think it's that the whole human animal bond, supporting that and trying to do whatever we can to make sure that it's unbreakable.
I love it. That's super powerful. For anyone who is listening and wants to get involved with CCBS or be a part of studies or whatnot, how are you guys at CCBS? How can pup parents become involved with you guys?
Yeah, thank you. So our studies are listed on our website when they're available, and we also send out newsletters. So going to our website and signing up for our newsletter is the best way to be noticed or to get notifications of our newsletter, of our studies. You can also go to our Facebook page. So, again, we'll share those links, but it's dogstudies.org. And then you can find us on Facebook, the Center for Canine Behavior Studies. And we love having Facebook followers. We post information about our studies, information about behaviors and dog info, and then just some good, fun dog loving stuff too. So I hope people really enjoy following our pages. And we are a nonprofit, so our studies are funded through the generosity of the public. And we're, always accepting donations, as any nonprofit is. But that's really how our mission gets across, is through these studies. So we are reliant on donations and are appreciative of any contributions given.
Awesome. And like Allie said, I'm going to put the link to website, Facebook. I'll make sure there's plenty in there so you don't have any questions on where to go if you just go into the show notes, whether you're listening to this on your favorite podcast platform or if you are watching this on YouTube. But I think that's a kind of a good wrapping point. And I have to say, I learned a lot. I always I leave these interviews feeling like empowered, like, man, I just need to go leave and like hug my dog. Like, I have 3 dogs and I'm like, man, I need more arms to give more pets. But like I think the biggest takeaway for me, and I hope the listeners feel this as well, is that there is the relationship we can have with our dogs is like nothing else. And I think holistically, what's happening at Pupford, what CCBS is doing as well. A lot of it comes down to how we train our dogs, how we communicate with them, how we build that relationship. So that's just my little call to action to you outside of going and checking out CCBS is, work on your relationship with your dog, put the time in, put the effort in, do the training, keep working at it because it's hard. We've been there. Allie was saying she had a punk 6-month-old dog. My dog is like 2.5 and she's still kind of a punk sometimes. Like they have their little rebellious streaks, but like if you work through it, you stay patient, it's definitely worth it. And the relationship that you'll come out with on the other end is like nothing else, like Allie was saying. So thank you so much, Allie, for coming on. I have really, really enjoyed this, and I'm sure the listeners have as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I hope so. This was a blast. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So again, I will link to the show notes. If you are listening on a podcast platform, please leave us a review. We read every single one of them, and we love the feedback. We kind of tweak our episodes based on what people are telling us in those reviews. So leave a review, leave us some feedback. We'll read it and we'll get back to you, and we will catch you guys on the next episode.